Let's get going. Today's conversation is with Dr. Leslyn Keith, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation on obesity and the lymph connection. And hopefully, that's raised enough intrigue. And so we'll get into it quickly. Let me just go through a couple of housekeeping things. As always, please type away your questions in the chat window, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end and stay on mute so that everyone can hear clearly. If you're not already a member of the Longevity Lab, it's worth doing it. There are lots of interesting things happening on it. And to get on it, just scan the QR code or click on that link. We'll send that to you offline. Um, every week, we announce one thing that one partnership that we make available to our members. This week's partnership is with a number of different providers of healthy salads. We talk about the importance of fiber and salads, and to make sure that that's easier for you to access, we have gone and done deals with 4 different organizations, entities. There is the first one, Nourishing Farms, Smart Bowls, Health Kitchen, and Green Tokery. They're all right now only in India. We'll hope to get partnerships outside India as well. The pricing in the MRP column is what you would pay if you went to them directly. As a member of the community, you would get the price in the second last column, that's the offer column. And I've just tried to translate that into a per salad bowl, what that would cost you. It's all about $2.5 for those who are wondering outside India what that means. And all in all, we have tested each of these guys, and these are the criteria we used to test them before we brought them to you. We wanted to make sure each salad has a reasonable amount, so 200 to 250 grams of weight, which would translate to typically 5 to 7 grams of fiber. That's a nice amount of fiber to have in a salad. They're all in the 120 to 150 calories, with fiber being in that greater than 6 grams. That was our requirement before we decided to have them be a partner. Total carbs, we don't want this to be a carb heavy salad, so we ensure that it's all below 15 grams. Sugars, no added sugars, but the natural sugars that come from vegetables and fruits that we wanted to ensure is about less than 6 grams. Fat, we wanted to be mostly healthy fat, so we ensure that it's all primarily unsaturated fat, 5 to 7 grams altogether, with saturated fat, the not so healthy part. I mean, you still require some amount of saturated fat in your diet, but it should be typically no more than 15 to 20%. And so that is what we have ensured is the case, and not too much sodium. So those were the criteria we used to decide whether an organization made the cut, and the ones that I showed you did make the cut. So you now can order. As always, just message the number at the bottom. It's one of the accounts on the community, and you'll get a code. And once you get the code, you can directly deal with the organizations and pick the one you want. We've, like I said, tasted all of them. They're all excellent. So definitely try it out. So far the discounts to date, we've now got you guys discounts on blood tests up to 25%. If you go to any of the partners we have teamed up with, 40% or so on imaging tests. Then on the Fitbit, we got a 7% Fitbit and Google Pixel wearables. On protein supplements that we have evaluated about 25%, and now the salads. So as always, we don't take any commissions or cuts. All the savings are passed on straight to you. All right. Next week's guest is Dr. Nishal Raval, and it's an interesting topic of psychosexual health. It's a topic I myself knew very little about, and it's only something that I learned much more about after I had a chance to speak to Dr. Raval. And so I think you'll find it quite a fascinating conversation when you join next week's call. All right. On to today's guest, an expert guest of honor, Dr. Leslyn Keith. Her bio is up on the screen. I'm not going to go through it, and it's a highly condensed version. If you were to put the whole thing, it would stretch across pages. So I'll let you guys read it. But what I do want to highlight is that Dr. Keith is a certified lymphedema therapist and has a doctorate in occupational therapy with this focus on obesity and lymphedema. She's been at it for 25 years, and it's a long time to really focus on one thing, which means this is something she's really good at. And I had a chance to speak to her a few months back, and she was highly recommended by one of our community members, Anu. And so, thanks to Anu and thanks to Dr. Keith, we've got her to agree to do this. So, Leslyn, without further ado, welcome to the community conversations.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a very interesting group. I've been a member now for several weeks and following along all the messages going back and forth on WhatsApp and all the interesting conversations that you all have. I found it very interesting.
Lovely. I mean, we are so glad to have you on the community as well. So let's start with something with the basics. And I know words like overweight and obese are thrown around as English words without any, how someone is defined as overweight or obese, most of us don't think about. But there is actually a definition. And the definition is a BMI of over 25 is overweight and a BMI of over 30 is obese. Mm-hmm. And so that's a definition that's sort of used by the medical community. And so with that as a definition, based on the fact that you've been at it for so long, is that framing of using BMI as a way to define this, does that do justice? Is there more to it than just using BMI?
Yeah, very much so. And one thing is, we talk about that people are what we call TOFI. So they look fine on the outside, but they're actually have a problem with adipose deposition on the inside. It's around their organs. So they look like they're thin and fit, but they actually do have a metabolic problem already brewing. It just isn't outwardly visible. So BMI is not always helpful because of that. And the other reason too is my specialty in lymphatic and adipose tissue disorders and a specific type called lipedema. Because of where the fat is on a person with lipedema, BMI also doesn't work. It's not useful for that person. So we like to use either waist to hip ratio or waist to height ratio as an added. So along with BMI, and then hopefully if you could also do body composition and see what's happening on the inside. So I think, we start with BMI. It's always in your doctor's record. That's automatically a part of the data that needs to be collected, but we got to go beyond that.
Yeah. And, you mentioned TOFI, the thin outside, fat inside. Mm-hmm. This hit hard for me. This hit home for me about 11 years back. My BMI 11 years back was 22. So well within what is considered healthy. And when I was diagnosed, one of the first things my doctor told me when I was diagnosed with heart disease 11 years back, the first thing my doctor told me is, you need to lose weight. And I was like, nobody's ever told me that. People have said, put on weight. Nobody's told me to lose weight. And he said, because you're TOFI. And I thought he was abusing me. I'm like, what is that? Was that a curse word or something? And he said, in some sense, yes. It's the type of thing that you don't even know. And he said, you have a lot of this hidden visceral fat. And so that's what you need to fix. And I truly believe when he told me this, that I don't think there's any way for me to lose weight. And so I went on this, lower added sugar diet. And sure enough, in 3 months, I lost 22 pounds.
Wow.
I could not believe that.
How much around the visceral fat? How much did that reduce?
Yeah. And so do you also refer to this other thing about the body composition? Mm-hmm. And so because I'd done a body composition, I also, on that, it said my visceral fat on that scale was like 10, mm-hmm. which is still in that supposedly okay range. But by the end of the 3 months, when I lost the 22 pounds, that visceral fat had gone from 10 to 3.
Mhm.
And if someone looked at me, they could not tell I lost too much weight. They would have said, yeah, you lost a couple of pounds on your face,
Mhm.
right? But that is when it hit home. And I think this is a point that I really wanted to drive home for everyone else, is that BMI is not a great indicator. What's happening inside our bodies, we don't always know. And that's why the points you made are very critical for everyone to understand. And that is, go do a body composition. Nowadays, these scales are available on Amazon for $25. They may not be very accurate, but they give you a better idea than not knowing anything at all. And
Many
doctor,
gyms have body composition scales that are going to be a little bit higher level.
yes.
So, going to a gym or the one you're already using, they probably have one, and check that out.
Yeah. In fact, though, it's called an in-body scan. That's the more sort of a higher end version of it. That's what you get at the gyms and your doctor's office.
Mhm.
At home you get more of the cheaper ones. But yeah, a DEXA scan is a little bit more expensive and all of that. But any way that you can get a body composition done is
Mhm.
absolutely worth doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So there was a lot of stuff that you said that was so critical. The TOFI, don't go by how you look, don't go by the weighing scale, don't go by BMI alone. Look at your body composition.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it also brings the question, Leslyn, about uh, people have historically been told that your obesity is because of you.
Yes.
And that's also, I'm sure you'll shed light on this, that's not always completely true, is it?
No, it's not. And it's only because if you don't know, what you chose to do was to limit your sugar intake, limit your carbohydrate and starch and sugar intake. If you don't know about that, which most people don't know, most doctors don't know about, if you're following the guidelines that are pretty much low fat but high carbohydrate kind of eating, and you think I'm doing what's been asked of me, I'm eating how I've been told to eat, and yet I can't lose weight, or I can't lose the body fat part of weight. So that is absolutely not your fault. And I think that it's been characterized as a character flaw, and that people internalize that I'm doing something wrong. I don't have enough willpower, and it is absolutely not your fault. And I earlier was talking about a condition called lipedema. And for some people, having a low fat, low calorie, lose weight, maybe not the right kind of weight, but that way of eating absolutely does not work for lipedema. There is no way to lose lipedema fat with that type of eating. And all of these women who have that condition, they absolutely have internalized that this is my fault. I can't do it. There's something wrong with me. Therefore, I give up. And
Yeah.
so it's not good to not have the support of your medical providers. Instead, they're abusing you. Like you kind of felt abused by your doctor at first.
Yeah. And, there's this whole category within obesity, and maybe it's not even within obesity, it's related to obesity, is lipedema, like you said. And I really want to double click on that because there is so much to unpack there, given that that's not as rare a condition as I myself thought until we spoke. I thought this vertical of lipedema was, happened to a small, tiny percentage, but it's not. And so before I double click on that, I also want to make one other point that you highlighted, and that is, very often we don't know what's causing our issues. In my case,
Right.
I was under the impression that drinking fresh squeezed orange juice every day was a healthy thing.
Mhm.
And it's only when I was diagnosed that I dug deeper into it, and I was told, oh, well, that's a sugar shot, right?
Mhm.
You eat
Yes.
3 oranges, don't drink 3 oranges worth of orange juice every
Mhm.
day. And so awareness is probably half the battle, right? If many of us were aware, we would make slightly different decisions.
Mhm.
But now let's say that awareness is something like, for example, through the community, we're trying to help build awareness. But if awareness is built, what's the next big thing to overcome in order to help, address this whole obesity and lipedema
Right.
issue that we're seeing?
Yeah, and I think it's because we've been trained to that. I think what you alluded to when you did the announcement for my talk, you were talking about this whole calories in, calories out, that we feel like it's all based on calories. And if we just cut our calories, we're going to lose weight in a healthy way. We're going to change our body composition and be more healthy. And it just actually will compound your problem. So it's more important what you eat or what you don't eat than the number of calories. So I think it is, I like to use Dr. Ben Bickman, who is a researcher out of Brigham Young, and he has this very short phrases that give you some general guidelines on the better way to eat. And it is, first, control your carbs. Just the first thing that you did was you reduced your sugar and starch intake. So number one, control your carbs. But next, prioritize protein. Because we tend to, when we go to this low fat, low calorie eating, first thing that's thrown out is protein, and we're not getting enough protein. We need plenty of protein. And the last one is to fill in with fat, or he sometimes says, don't fear fat. Right. And so have plenty of fat, but not necessarily, I mean, people are sometimes aware of ketogenic diets that were typically used for people who have epilepsy to control their seizures. And these were, 80% or more with fat. And people are astonished with that and concerned. And you don't need to fear that fat, but you don't necessarily need that high level of fat just to eat healthy and maybe to lose some weight. It depends on any other conditions that you have, of course, but generally, what I tell people is first you bring your carbs down. You're probably going to bring your fat up because you need satiety, but you're prioritizing protein to make sure you have plenty of healthy protein. And so we use that way of eating. We no longer have that insulin response that is causing us to store fat rather than burn fat. Now we have access to not only our body fat stores, but any fat that we eat, we have access for that, for all the things that fat does, for building hormones, for repair of tissue, for energy. So that's a kind of a general guidelines of how to eat, especially if you're TOFI. If you outwardly look healthy, but your doctor tells you you're not, then this is a very simple way to now become healthy.
Yeah. And again, there is so much in what you just said, Leslyn. One is, for a long time, fat was made the villain.
Yes.
In the picture, because the lobbies didn't want the focus to be on the sugar and the
right.
carb.
Yes.
And so fat got this unfair villain stature.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the last few years, I think that has become clearer. And I love Dr. Ben Bickman. I think he's amazing. He provides his sympathies. Don't fear the fat. When you eat certain things, the fat will come with it.
Yes.
Embrace it, right?
Yes.
Make sure the protein is added, and eat your carbs. Don't drink them.
That's a good guideline for someone, especially is trying to lose weight. I mean, one thing that we do in the low carb community is we like to use high fat, full fat cream. And Dr. Eric Westman says, put a little dollop in your coffee, but don't sit there and pour until you have a whole cup in there. Yeah. So it is very easy to have a lot more fat than maybe you need when you're drinking it, as you say.
Yeah. And I think just having a good balance is key. I mean, the keto diet, like you said, goes the other extreme. Now it just loads on the fat when there is no need to do that either. It's just keep it balanced. Usually a moderate diet never hurts. It always helps. And one other interesting tidbit that you mentioned, a lot of people don't know, and I did not know that as well until maybe a few months back, that the keto diet was actually introduced for people who had specific mental health issues rather than for people who were trying to lose weight.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right? And it was actually used before we had insulin injections. We knew that helped with diabetes. It was for people with type 1 diabetes It helped them survive. and the others were pediatric epilepsy. And those were the two main things it was being used for. And then gradually it became known as a weight loss diet. And certainly if you went to ketogenic levels, it worked spectacularly, but it can also work even if you just go to low carb and not necessarily all the way as low as ketogenic levels.
Yeah, and so the trade-off has always been made between carbs and fat, but what has always been ignored is protein.
Yes.
Right? You bring your carb down, you don't want your fat to be super high, so that'll also come a little bit lower, but then you fill in the rest with protein, and protein can not only add the satiety element, but also, give you that delta so that you have a healthy, well-balanced meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely, I like how Dr. Beckman says prioritize protein because it has been ignored and it tends to be too low. Interestingly, because I work with lymphatic disorders and people who swell, when you get too low of protein, this condition called hypoproteinemia, you swell. And so if you already have a swelling disorder and then you don't eat enough protein, it just exacerbates it. So we need to keep the carbs low, but keep the protein at a good level and fill in with the fat.
Yeah. And maybe this is a perfect time to talk about the whole, you've mentioned the lymphatic system a couple of times. Maybe, Leslyn, if you could just describe what that is in simple terms for the members.
Yes, certainly. And it is a system that is very ignored by the medical community. And most people don't know what it is until you get diagnosed with either a swelling disorder, or a lot of people first time find out about it when they get a diagnosis of cancer, because the lymphatic system is highly involved in cancer and treatment of cancer. But it's a one-way system that it has a lot of very, very important duties. One is maintaining fluid balance in your body. So it's taking excess fluid out of the tissues and transporting it back to the blood. It also is a means of transporting dietary fat and fat-soluble vitamins. So you have lymphatic vessels that capture all that from the intestines and bring it to the bloodstream. It also is highly involved in your immune functions. So your lymphatic system will gather all the material and take it to the lymph nodes, which are scattered throughout your body in some concentrated areas. And that is filtering all the stuff, attacking the bad stuff, getting rid of the waste and basically cleaning everything up before it goes back into the bloodstream. So these are highly important functions. And when any of that is disrupted because you have some kind of injury or problem with your lymphatic system, then everything gets out of balance. You have swelling, you have more infections, you might have nutrient deficiencies. So your lymphatic system and keeping that healthy is really, really important.
I've noticed whenever I have an infection, it's these things over here, I think they're lymph nodes, if I'm not mistaken,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
That they start swelling up, or like I got a shot the other day, a vaccine shot, and my area in the armpits is swollen.
Yes.
Are those sort of the practical ways we experience it, but don't know what's happening?
Right. So when you go into your doctor and they're doing that wellness check, even they're always palpating you around in those areas right there. So they're checking to see if you have any swelling, which indicates that your system is fighting an infection or something, or an inflammation. So they're checking that. And another way people might notice their lymphatic system being affected is how many of you at the end of a hot day have swelling around your ankles and feet? How many of you, after you've been sitting for a long time, a really long car drive, or sitting on a plane, you get that, it seems like your ankles feel kind of stiff? And it's because there's some swelling that's gathered there, just because you're not using your muscles. One way that helps the lymph move back to your heart, to the bloodstream, and fight against gravity is muscle contraction. So when we're sitting a long time and not using our muscles, we're sitting at our computer all day for our work or whatever, then we're not aiding that circulation, aiding that return of that lymphatic fluid back to our blood circulation.
Yeah, as you're saying this, suddenly so many things are rushing back to me. I remember having surgery, and then I had to get onto a plane, and it was a long flight, and they said you're going to be, keep your legs up for as long as you possibly can, and then walk around because you're
Yes.
going to get all this swelling again. Is that the lymphatic system that
Yes.
is causing all of this?
Yes, and it used to be that we thought that when all the blood went to your cells through the arteries and was delivered, all the nutrient and oxygen was delivered to your cells, we thought that most of it was reabsorbed on the venous side. But in 2010, through better technology and imaging, they were a great paper by Levick and Michelle came out and said, no, actually, most, if not all, is picked up by the lymphatic system and delivered back to the bloodstream. So it's being cleaned up first and putting back in the bloodstream. So when you get that swelling that is appearing after being immobile or post-surgery, getting some post-surgical swelling, that's because the lymphatic system is temporarily overwhelmed with an increased fluid load and can't quickly evacuate that out of the area. So that is the lymphatic system. When we discovered that in 2010, we found that it's way more important than we ever thought. It is a very important parallel system to the circulatory system.
And so what happens, people talk about, when someone has cancer, that, it's reached these lymph nodes.
Mm-hmm.
What's actually happening? Is it sort of now making these lymph nodes not work as well? Because what actually is happening?
So when you get a tumor and particles of that tumor have now gotten outside of an encased tumor, it is automatically stuff is delivered to the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system takes it to the regional nodes, wherever that may be. It could be your groin, abdomen, under your arms, along your neck. And so it's taking it to the nearest lymph node bed. And those lymph nodes are built to annihilate what they see as foreign and toxic particles. But if there's a whole lot being delivered, they can get overwhelmed. And now you've got a lot of those particles in a lymph node, hopefully keeping them there and not releasing it but it's being held there. And so when you have that, when you have the tumor excised and they're checking for what lymph nodes that those particles might have gone to, they're also removing those lymph nodes to see, okay, yes, it got here, hopefully did not get beyond there, which they don't know. And so now it used to be they wanted to remove every single lymph node to try to save your life and keep it from going anywhere else. But now they know that there's no guarantee it hasn't gone somewhere else. What we're finding out when we excise those lymph nodes and see the cancer is there, it just tells us we now need to do a systemic therapy. We need to do something that's going to get to all the cells of your body to annihilate that cancer wherever it may go. But we don't want to necessarily remove every single lymph node, because you will get a condition called lymphedema, which can be very, very uncomfortable and destroy your quality of life while you're also trying to deal with your cancer. So we're trying to keep you from getting that swelling disorder on top of everything else that you're going through.
Got it. I mean, I know this is not a topic, cancer was not the topic, but
yes,
you're opening up so many interesting doors and ways of thinking about this because of the whole lymphatic system.
Yes.
So given what you've described, now in that context, lipedema, what is lipedema exactly? How does that manifest itself in people, and why does it show up?
Yes, yeah. So lipedema, what we're discovering is there's quite a bit of a genetic component, although the genes have not been identified and they're doing gene studies. But there is something that predisposes a person to getting lipedema, and then when you have the environmental inputs, the epigenetics, then it can cause it to really flourish. And so it is pretty much a condition that's exclusively to women. But there are some reports of men now that we're seeing that have the condition. Generally, they have an endocrine disorder that then allows them to present with this. And the genes are passed through, they're seeing through the male side. So this is not unusual that a man can get it, but it's definitely a female disorder. But it's more than right here. I'm just showing two types of obesity. So that fat deposition that happens in lipedema is not either android or gynoid obesity. Typically, men get that obesity around the belly, and women tend to get more of that pear-shaped obesity. And so, and when we look at that gynoid presentation on a female, we say, well, that's kind of a lipedema shape. We have much more fat in the lower body, not so much in the upper body. But there are other characteristics of lipedema that make it different from this presentation of obesity. And if you go to the next slide, we can show how it's different. And so we get, we can still have that narrow waist, but they have that deposition on the lower body and on the arms, but it's also very painful fat. Obesity fat is not painful there. So there's something highly inflammatory that's happening in the lipedema fat. And you can see in the picture on the far right, you can get that ankle cuff almost, and then abruptly there's nothing happening on the feet. So for the person on the far, sorry, that was on the left. And on the right, that person has it mostly around the hips and the thighs, and you can sometimes get an overhang over the knees, and then there's just nothing on the lower legs. So we have this concentration of fat in certain areas that's very painful. Just having a pet jump on your lap could be very painful. When you have it in the upper arms, as the person in the middle does, getting a blood pressure test is highly painful. This person will also bruise very easily. And this person is absolutely resistant to the typical weight loss measures like low calorie, low fat dieting, exercise, even bariatric surgery will not cause this lower body fat and sometimes the arm fat to leave. Sometimes this is when we first discover that a woman has lipedema, is because she had also obesity along with lipedema. And so then after the bariatric surgery, she only lost the obesity fat on the abdomen, and nothing happened to the lower body. So that's when we start thinking, okay, there's something else going on here, not just your typical obesity.
And Leslyn, it's, I mean, I know you've mentioned this to me in the past, and I just wanted to clarify that for the group over here. There is a difference between the, when you see someone in this, if they're obese, it's fat cells that are accumulating. If it's a lipedema, it may be more of the swelling from the fluid, from the lymphatic system.
You know, in that picture on the far left, I think that she also has some fluid. But the other two pictures, she doesn't really have a lot of fluid in those other two pictures. And so it is primarily a fat disorder. But the biopsies that they've done from people who have lipedema and others that have obesity, the fat tissue itself is different. There is a pathology in the fat. We've heard of people being pretty much metabolic. They can say they're metabolically healthy and the fat tissue is actually healthy. But we're not seeing that in lipedema fat. There is a lot of foreign particles. There's dead fat cells. There's too many fat cells, and there's also some that are too large. And there's a lack of ability to get the nutrients to each cell and ability to remove the waste products from them. You have an infusion of macrophages. So there's just a lot of differences between lipedema fat and obesity fat.
And then this goes to the point about the way to treat both are not the same, right? There is a difference.
Well, and you know what we're finding is the many clinical trials on obesity and using a carbohydrate restricted diet, excellent for that. And when we first were thinking about using it for lipedema, well, we had already been told diet and exercise has no effect. But well, what the heck, let's give it a try. And I was with a couple of women who thought that, okay, let's see what happens. It seemed to help in all these other conditions. Maybe it'll also help in lipedema. We had no idea what we were doing. I had spoken to Dr. Eric Westman. I used his eating plan that he used with his patients in his clinic for that had obesity, and I applied it to, I said, I just gave it to the women and I said, here, give us a try. No coaching or anything. And they were desperate. They were in a lot of pain. They were not able to move as well because of so much fat in the lower body. So they gave it a try. And we had women calling and notifying us within probably about 6 months saying, I cannot believe it. I've never been able to lose fat on my lower body before, and now I am. And since that time, and that was probably around 2015, 2016, there now have been over a dozen clinical trials and case reports and such for lipedema and using some level of carbohydrate restriction. And it is showing absolutely astounding results for decrease in pain. And that happens before they even lose any weight. Decrease in body fat in the lipedema affected areas. A decrease in volume in the affected areas. A lot of the symptoms that we associate with lipedema are resolving very nicely, and they resolve even more the more you restrict the carbohydrates. But some of these studies are showing that even a modest restriction has results. And so if you don't have a super severe presentation, maybe you can choose what your level of carbohydrate restriction is that you want to use.
And is there a specific protein amount that you recommend, Leslyn? Like, is it like 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight? What's the number that you look at?
So we tell them 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight. But then it needs to be done specifically to that person. A couple of my colleagues and I are publishing a paper right now about how to individualize a carbohydrate restricted eating plan for the person. And we're looking at not only their comorbidities and their health, but also looking at their culture. What types of foods do you want to eat because of your culture? How do you feel socially? Is this going to be, your eating style? Is it going to affect your ability to, for family gatherings and stuff like that? So we're looking at just your preferences and all those types of things. And then we help put together an eating plan that's going to be really suitable for that person, control their symptoms, be sustainable. I know that was one of your other questions. So how do you make this last long? And I think individualization is key to that for someone being able, this is going to need to be a lifelong way of eating. How are we going to make that sustainable, pleasurable for the long term?
Now, I think what you just said is so critical. One of the biggest challenges, we've interviewed now so many people who were on the keto diet, and 95% at least, maybe higher, could not sustain a keto diet beyond 3 months.
Mm-hmm. And I think it had a lot to do with what they were told, the parameters of what they had to do. There was a fabulous study done out of Belgium for people who had lymphedema, and that's a person that has, usually due to cancer treatment, they have swelling in that area that was treated for cancer. And so in that study, they prescribed that they had to have almost like these, the fat levels associated with what you use for epilepsy. So a really high fat diet and particular types of fat. And I think, they were told they had to, put olive oil on top of their steak or whatever. And instead of just having the fat that came along with the steak, they were having to do all these machinations. And it's just not the way they would have chosen to eat. And so having to follow a prescribed diet that is not individualized for you, it's absolutely not sustainable. You need to look at what you're going to enjoy and what fits into your way of life.
Yeah. And, even things like protein. I know different people can metabolize protein very differently. For some, it'll is dramatically increase their EGFR values and bilirubin and all these things. Or some it doesn't. The same amount of protein, and so personalizing it, like you're saying, depends on all these things. How does it culturally integrate into your life? Is it something you can do on an ongoing basis easily? Is it impacting your blood parameters for the worse or for the better? There is so much that goes into providing answers, but it's fascinating. And let's talk about what percentage of people of the population that is obese or overweight may actually be an example of lipedema than just obesity. It's not 0.1 or 1%, right?
Yeah. Well, and the estimates are up to 10 to 11% of women worldwide may have lipedema. It is very difficult to project exactly the numbers because it is a lot of times disguised as obesity, and also the issue that as in general the world is becoming more and more obese. They're saying up to maybe 80% of people who have lipedema also have obesity. So the diagnosis of obesity for them is not false. It's just that they're also not realizing they have another condition as well. And it really takes an educated and aware healthcare provider to identify and sometimes tease out which conditions they actually have. It's quite often the onset for lipedema is at puberty. And so if I have a woman telling me that I noticed that my legs were bigger than my other peers when I started menstruating, that would be a red flag for me that this might be lipedema. And then she'll tell me other things like the pain and stuff like that. And I'm starting to think, okay, yes, I see some abdominal obesity. That's happening, but she also has lipedema. We're starting to get more and more physicians that are aware of this condition. And so, and it's astonishing that once they find out about it, they go, oh, well, I think I have 10 or 20 other patients that have this also. You start seeing it everywhere. So I think that's a huge thing, is by having me talk about this in your group, is that hopefully we get the awareness out so that people realize that you may have this condition and there's something you can do.
Yeah, I mean, if we go to our doctors and if we just ask the question, hey, could this be lipedema? You've already sort of got a better conversation going. And maybe the answer is no, but at least now there is a conversation around it.
Yes. Yes.
I was intrigued. I don't know whether this is an example of social media watching everything we do, but yesterday I got a video shown to me. It was recommended for me to be seen, which was how to exercise for better lymphatic health. I'm like, wow, what are the chances that the day before I'm going to talk to you, I get this video? But it was basically showing someone who was sort of flapping around their hands and their legs and sort of just massaging themselves while flapping around. And it felt like, yeah, this looks interesting. But is there such a thing as exercising for keeping your lymphatic system healthy?
Just moving.
Just moving.
just moving in general. Now, if a person has an actual, like they have lymphedema, backup of fluid in like an arm or a leg after their cancer treatment, I'm going to give them certain exercises to that area that's affected. How can we help that move out of that area? But in general, for lymphatic health, just moving. And we do like to recommend, especially moving in the water, because the water does that graded compression. As you're exercising, you're also have more pressure at your feet, and it's gradually helping that lymphatic system to get stuff back to the trunk and into blood circulation. So if you want to look at a good exercise for your lymphatic system, it's standing vertical, doing like a water exercise class is going to be one of the best places. But for our healthy bones, we got to have that gravity situation. So you don't want that to be your only exercise, but it is very good for the lymphatics.
Yeah, it sounds like movement in general is a good thing across the board.
Yes.
I know there are probably questions we need to keep time aside from the audience, but one thought on the, you're publishing a lot. You've been at it for a while.
Mhm.
How are you seeing research in this area take off? You've sort of seen this from the beginning. Is it picking up steam? Is it getting more attention?
Yes. And so, as you said, you've had a lot of people come on talk about ketogenic diet. So they have the low carb community is very much exploding, but in the lipedema community and in the lymphatic community, it is the amount of research that's being done just in the last 10 years is pretty astounding. Lipedema was first identified in 1940 at the Mayo Clinic. And after it was identified, pretty much nothing was done. I mean, there was a little bit in the 80s, but in the last 10 years, there's been an explosion in research on lipedema. If you look at if you go to Google Scholar, you see the number of papers from 1940 and then 1980, not so much. And then 1980 to 2000, a little bit more. 2000 and on, it's a huge amount of papers have been doing that. People are seeing more, they're understanding more about lymphatics and specifically about disorders associated with the lymphatic system.
Yeah, I'm glad to see the interest and attention to this space is going up, because it seems to be one of those few areas where there just isn't as many discussions as it deserves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you mentioned, Leslyn, there's a book. Was it a paper? You've already written 2 books. Is there a 3rd book in the works?
So I've written 2 books specifically about using carbohydrate restriction or a ketogenic diet to help with lymphedema and lipedema. But right now I'm working with Dr. Stanley Roxon and Dr. Catherine Seo as editors of a textbook about lipedema. We're using worldwide experts contributing information about lipedema and putting it all in one place. We're hoping that's going to help guide clinicians and spur even more research. So that we expect to be out at the beginning of next year.
Oh, wow. Lovely. Good luck with that.
Mm-hmm.
And please do, when that comes out, please do send us the link. We'd like to promote that on the community.
Sure.
I'm sure a lot of us would benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get to the questions, Leslyn. The first question from the community is ghee over butter or oils like olive oil?
Yes. And so I do like to promote both for protein and fat to get animal sources. And now, again, this all depends on you. And I think someone else had a comment about being vegetarian. And so you may be looking at more plant-based sources of your fats and proteins. But if you can get some animal sources in your diet for the ones that you're comfortable with, for instance, like eggs or ghee is wonderful. So butter or any of those animal sourced fats. And then and also with the proteins, I think eggs are perfect. It's protein and fat. So if you like eggs, that could be, and a lot of people are lacto-ovo vegetarians, and so they're willing to do dairy, and they do okay health-wise with dairy, and they want to use, they're okay with eggs to use that. But definitely, as far as industrial produced oils, we generally suggest not to have those seed oils that require a high amount of heat and a lot of chemicals in order to get a oil out of a seed. It may not be the most beneficial thing. It is interesting that a lot of those oils were used for industrial lubricants and not part of the diet until they figured that they can be used for the diet. And so I would stay away from, any of those highly processed. If you can find something that is cold pressed, like olive oil, like avocado oil, coconut oil, those are just squeezed to get the oil instead of putting through that high process.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I think even 2% fat or full fat yogurt, right? Greek yogurt.
Yes.
That's a great source of protein and fat.
Yes, if you are okay with dairy, I do love getting fat from dairy, and so I do recommend like the plain Greek yogurts, full fat yogurts. That's also a nice supply of the fermentation that can be helpful. So using that is also going to be a good source. Yes.
Yeah. And to Sujata's question about does taking protein shakes help as a supplement if you're not getting enough from a vegetarian diet? Let's say you've done the eggs and the yogurt and nuts and all of that, and you still need more. What is your take on protein supplements?
So so I would suggest two things. One is a lot of the protein shakes come with a lot of additives, and some people do not do well with those additives. And so you're looking for something that doesn't have any sugar added. And you may, if you have a problem with sweeteners, which they think that we have to have it sweet, so they always add some kind of sweetener. So even maybe you may not do good with the sweeteners they typically use, but any of those, they want to add something so it doesn't clump and it mixes up nicely. You know what? I'm fine with it being lumpy. I would rather not have the emulsifier or something in there that might be giving me a problem with my gut. So you want to get something that is just the protein. A lot of people will use whey protein. And there is some, I haven't been able to find it on the shelf in a health food store. I have to go online and find, you search for something that's just whey, nothing else added. I don't know if I'm allowed to say products on here, but
No, please, if you have a recommendation, Leslyn, please.
So I do use something that's called naked whey because it's naked because it has nothing else. It's just the whey. Now they do have flavored ones and they do have ones that have the sweeteners, but you can get one that's only whey and then add it to your, I like to add it with cream and have it. And so it can be a nice way to get your protein up without having any other things that might come with those protein shakes.
Yeah, and I completely agree with what you're saying, Leslyn. And I'll just add to that. I also do have 3 days a week on the days I do strength training. I do the protein shake, and I picked a protein shake that's unflavored because the moment it's chocolate or any of these things, it comes with a lot of other baggage, heavy metals, and so on. So unflavored, I look for how much sugar is added. It has to be no sugar added to it, and then I get the tasty aspect of it by adding in berries and walnuts and almonds and those are nice healthy ways to add the flavoring you want rather than it coming pre-packaged in ways that you can't control.
You really want to control the ingredients. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, by the way, that's the exact same reason that we always recommend when you do go get a salad at a restaurant, ask for the dressing on the side because very often the dressing is just filled with sugar. Right? So you can then control how much you add it in versus getting it pre-mixed.
I've been known to bring my own olive oil to the restaurant, little bottle in the purse, and then I can just do that myself, squeeze a lemon and add a little salt and done.
Can we discuss hyperlipidemia, specifically high LDL related, and how one can work towards fixing that with lifestyle changes?
Yeah, and so can be an area of confusion because lipedema is different from hyperlipidemia. It's got a slightly different spelling, but sometimes people think you're talking about high cholesterol or something like that when we're talking about the condition of lipedema. But in general, with the randomized controlled trials that have been done on using a carbohydrate restricted diet, that these numbers improve. Most people, their lipid panel improves. There's a small subset, they call it a lean mass hyperresponder. That person who is already coming in healthy and then uses a carbohydrate restricted diet, that their LDL number can go up. And so it's currently in being studied at UCLA to see, does that mean that this is bad for their heart? Is this a problem? Because the triglycerides are going down. The HDL, which is supposed to be the protective cholesterol, is going up, but the LDL is also going up. And it doesn't seem to happen with a person who is going into this way of eating who's obese. The LDL goes down and the HDL goes up with that person. So what they're trying to find out is when the numbers go this way with that small subset of the population, is this bad? Is this something that we should be worried about? Right now it's unknown that we're looking at that. But typically, especially if you're coming to this way of eating with someone who needs to lose weight, needs to lose body fat, that your blood panel numbers will improve.
Yeah. And Akanksha, just to add to that, we are going to have in a couple of weeks a session which is just AMA and Ask Me Anything with 3 doctors on the panel on this call, where all these questions, like the ones that you just asked, will be answered.
Yes.
Right. From Nadia, there's a question: is grapeseed oil a good source of oils?
Again, that's a seed. And in order to get oil out of a seed, it has to go through a process. They typically use a chemical called hexane. May not be something that's really good for you to eat something that's gone through that process. So I would really look for those cold pressed oils if you want to use a plant source of your oils. Otherwise, get your fat from animal sources.
Does fermentation in yogurt lead to inflammation?
And there's a lot that is being looked at with fermentation. So far, what we're learning is that it seems to be very helpful for most people. So it's just that the whole gut health and the microbiome is in its infancy, and we're not really sure. But what's being talked about is that having some fermented products in your diet seems to be good.
Yeah. We spoke about that on the community recently. Probiotics are fermented usually, and they seem to be good for the microbiome. So hopefully it's true for all.
I haven't found it to be different for my patients who have lymphatic disorders. It's something very individual. One of those things that, like I can't have any kimchi. I can't have, I don't do well with sauerkraut. Okay, let's move on then. You're not going to eat things that don't agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that is the last question we had, and that also perfectly comes to the end of our time slot. So, Leslyn, thank you so much. The conversation, I learned a lot, and I'm pretty sure the members on the community did as well. But what really fascinates me is this is a topic that impacts us on a day-to-day basis. We just don't know about it. And today you helped provide that clarity. But what's also been very, very amazing for me personally is the number of studies. This is something you're spending so much time on. You're keeping up with the latest research. And there was an estimate that every 30 seconds, there is a meaningful journal paper of high quality coming out. And who is keeping up with all of that? And I know what the answer to that question. You are. So so I'm sure we'd love to, if you are up to it, Leslyn, get you back on with all the latest learnings you've been able to get in this space, and I'm sure we'll all be that much smarter for it.
Yes, thank you very much. And I just wanted to tell you about one of the things, that there is a low carb doctor in India who has now had 2 wonderful virtual conferences, really focusing on people who live in India, but they go, of course, worldwide. And so I'll send you the link so that you can give it to the community, because I think this is an excellent source. If you're in India and you want to investigate this way of eating, it'd be great to go to a doctor who's there.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. That will be a very, very valuable resource. Pranav, and the second question, I don't know who Silver Oak spelling is. I'm sure that's not your name. For the answers to those questions, we'll try and answer them on the community. So if you just post them on the community, Leslyn, you can just take a shot at answering them over there.
Absolutely.
Right? All right. Thank you again, Leslyn, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.